Okay, wait. Okay. So it's recording to the cloud. You said it will send you
a link.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
whoever sets it up, whoever is the host.
Okay, so it'll send it to my email. Okay,
Right.
perfect. All right. That works great.
So you're
All right.
gonna start it?
I think it should have already started.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh. All right. Let me see. All right, just go ahead and start. I thought Raul wanted to see it.
So this is gonna be about, how long is it talk about?
20 minutes or so. Mhm. Sure, sure. You just stop it, or you want to just stop recording for a sec, or?
Oh, you know what?
Hmm.
I understand what happened now. Wait.
Yeah, I want that different. I want that to be there, and that to be here. Yeah. Oh, perfect.
There you
My
go.
goodness.
There you go. So good.
Raul's back. So we're recording right now? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. This is my presentation on Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. I think he's the most important scholar in America today, especially his views on race and the ability for us to acknowledge it and seek social change. All right, Dr. Kendi won the National Book Award at the youngest age ever at age 34. This presentation, I'm just going to go over some of the key themes and ideas and concepts in his work. All right, Dr. Kendi was born to parents Carol and Larry Rogers. As an interesting side note, he actually took the name Kendi at his marriage to his wife because in Meru it means loved one. So he actually changed his name at his marriage ceremony, which is both romantic and very cool. He was born to parents who were activists and followers of Black liberation theology. Now, Black liberation theology was started by Reverend James Cone. And at the core of Black liberation is an effort in a white-dominated society where Black has been defined as evil to make the gospel relevant to the life and struggles of Black Americans, help Black people learn to love themselves, and teach them to both be unapologetically Black and Christian at the same time, which are really cool things. Dr. Kendi received a double major bachelor's from FAMU, Florida Agriculture and Mechanical University. He also got his doctorate in African American Studies at Temple at age 27, which is quite impressive. He's really quite impressive at the ages he does things. These are some of his awards. He did win the National Book Award, as I said earlier, in 2016. Once again, that is the youngest person to ever win it at age 34. He also received an endowed professorship from the Boston University, which is, as I found out, the highest honor that they can give a professor is an endowed professorship. But he's also been a visiting professor and postdoc at Rutgers, Harvard, Brown, and there's that National Book Award again. All right, in Stamped from the Beginning, it's a lot about ideology and race. Now, he separates views on races into three categories. There are assimilationists. The assimilationist position is that Black people are inferior, and although perhaps not inherently so to white people, and that this inferiority can be reversed as assimilation into whiteness. Basically, what he's saying is, we'd like you if you were more like us. You know, it's that desire, you know, just, you know, become white. I'm putting it in a bad way, but basically you'll see it more when I talk about uplift suasion, what assimilationist means. Segregationist is the most blatant form of racism, which involves believing that Black people are inherently, permanently inferior to white people, and that Black people themselves are to blame for racial disparities. And that's one of the paradigms that he looks at race through, is disparities. What is the cause of these disparities between races? And this is his definition of a racist idea, and that's any idea that suggests a racial group is superior or inferior to another racial group in any way. And anti-racist is just the opposite of that. That's the idea that suggests that racial groups are equal. And an anti-racist are people who are actively supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or in expressing an anti-racist idea. All right, and here's a view of some of the disparities. This is the rate of imprisonment among white men and Black men. And you can see there's a huge disparity here. On the orange, you see this is per capita, the amount of Black young men and, of all ages in prison compared to the population per capita of white men. Now, that's a huge disparity. Black people make up only 13% of the population in general, yet are 40% represented in prison. Now, there's a lot of ways you could view this. An assimilationist would say, well, if you acted more white, we wouldn't arrest you so much. A segregationist says, Black people are just blatantly bad. There's, that's their fault they're in prison. And an anti-racist would view these statistics and say, there's something going on here. It's not the racial group that's the cause of this disparity. It's actually a racist policy. And we'll see that more later on. Okay, here's some myths of origin, and these are offensive, and they are. One that was very popular is called the climate theory of Aristotle. And he believed extreme climates produce people inferior to the Greeks. He labeled Africans burnt faces, and that is actually the original meaning of the Greek word Ethiopian. Which, as I read this book, I found out there's just a lot of terms that, are in circulation that we don't really understand the racist root of. One that is particularly offensive that I found out is actually mulatto. Mulatto is root word for mule. And this is the belief that Blacks and whites were actually separate species and their offspring would be sterile. So that is the root of the word mulatto, which I had no idea how offensive that is. And there's also the curse theory. And this is Noah cursed one of his sons, Ham. And this is the belief that Africans are descended from the cursed son of Ham. And both of these are obviously ridiculous. Race itself is socially constructed. I just wanted to have this out here because this is in the background, These are things that they were taught, especially the first person we'll talk about, Cotton Mather. This is something he learned, especially Aristotle's view, And again, racist ideas are created to support racist policies. It's not the other way around. We create these ideas to justify what we're doing. And we'll begin with Cotton Mather. Dr. Kendi divided his book into 5 parts, and each is a view of the history of racism and how it progressed. At age 11, Cotton Mather attended Harvard. He was the first grade assimilationist, and he has some really awful quotes. He actually believed slavery was a good thing. He thought, here's a quote from him: "You are better fed and better clothed and better managed by far than you would be if you were your own man," which is obviously just blatantly ridiculous. And here's another thing: providence of God sent Africans into slavery to learn from the masters the glorious gospel. Now, that is ridiculous, and we'll see this again, especially this, if you remember when I talked about Black liberation theology, the view of Jesus as white. Now, Jesus could not have been white. He lived in ancient Israel. He would have been Middle Eastern descent. He would have looked nothing like Brad Pitt or however they tried to display him. But this is another instance of how they use religion to control. Thomas Jefferson, obviously he's very well known. He was the 3rd president, writer of the Declaration of Independence. And Thomas Jefferson is really just a paradox. And his life, he had several children with his maid, Sally Hemings. And he believed that Blacks and whites could not live together happily in civilization, but he actually had a Black girlfriend that he actually preferred to his white wife. So he's very convoluted, but Dr. Kendi uses this to show one of the policies that people thought would be to address race would be actually to deport Blacks to Africa. And a sad note on this, Thomas Jefferson only freed Sally and the children he shared with him on his death. So she was held captive for all of her life until he died. And, there's no such thing as consent when you were in that position, so she was blatantly, sexually abused for the bulk of her life. And that's just awful. Okay, William Lord Garrison. He was an abolitionist and an assimilation who believed in uplift suasion. Now, uplift suasion, I have defined here, It's based on the very racist idea that Black behavior was partially or totally responsible for the existence and persistence of racist ideas. Uplift suasion assumed that racist ideas are sensible, and that if showed how well a Black person was doing, people wouldn't be racist anymore. Now, this is totally insane. This places the blame of racism on the Black people and says it's their fault, and basically asks them to perform perfectly to just be accepted as human. And we all know that's impossible. Everyone's human, everyone makes errors. But William Lord Garrison, and this was a common belief, uplift suasion, and that's very assimilationist. Be like whites and you'll be okay. And there's a quote in the book that I just wanted to read. And this is from a Black man in Rhode Island. If you were dressed well, they would insult you for that. If you were ragged, they would surely be insulted for being so. So you're basically damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a policy that doesn't work, and it places all the responsibility on Blacks and Africans, or, he uses the term Black. I know it's somewhat offensive, but these are the terms Dr. Kendi used. I'm hopefully not offending anyone. William Lord Garrison later had a falling out. He actually wrote the preface to Frederick Douglass's The Narrative of the Life of, but him and Frederick Douglass had a falling out because Douglass thought, white people were too paternalistic, thought Blacks were incapable of securing their own rights and freedom. And he fell out with that. And Dr. Kendi uses this as a view of, uses this example to show the assimilation view and the practice of uplift suasion. W.E.B. Du Bois, he was the first African-American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard. He was a great sociologist. He wrote a great book in 1935, The Souls of Black Folk, and he was a professor at the University of Atlanta, amongst other places. Unfortunately, during his education, he internalized these assimilationist ideology and thought that he had to be what he thought white people wanted. You had to follow the white norms, read white books. This is sort of a turning point in the book, because this is the first person that actually becomes anti-racist. Remember, we talked about assimilationists, segregationists, and anti-racists. And W.E. Du Bois was able to accomplish that before his death in Ghana. And he also realized that uplift suasion was both racist and impossible. So we actually get the first of what is called an anti-racist paradigm or perspective or concept. The book ends with Dr. Angela Davis. She got her bachelor's at Brandeis University of California, San Diego, got her master's, and Humboldt University in Germany, where she studied under Herbert Marcuse, who was part of the Frankfurt School. He was a Marxist and critical theorist. He's best known for his work, One Dimensional Man. And Dr. Davis is a great example because she is anti-racist from start, from finish, from the word go. And this is where I think Dr. Kendi really builds on all of these concepts and really builds on Angela Davis, because she actually addressed the intersectionality of race, gender, and class in her famous work, Women, Race, and Class. So this is the ideal. This is to address racism. And if you remember, anti-racism is the view that all groups are equal. And here's just a summary. Racist ideas are born out of racist policies and not vice versa. Those who benefit from racist policies create an ideology to justify their behavior and continue their exploitive practices. You often hear people say, I'm not racist, I'm not racist. But this is often said by people who hide or justify their beliefs through bad science, theology, or biology. It's often said, I'm not racist, this is the facts, I'm not racist. Blacks are more violent, or I'm not racist, but there is no neutrality. You are either an anti-racist or a racist. That's it. You can't, I'm not racist is not, it's not a justifiable term, You're either anti-racist or racist, and that's the end of it. And I ask you, please, this is an amazing book. It really changed my life. And I've only really touched on some of the high points, but I urge you to read it. It won the National Book Award for a reason. All right, thank you. And thank you, guys. And here's the works cited and a great picture of Dr. Kendi. So hope you enjoyed it.
I wanted to ask,
Sure.
in your opinion, after reading the book, did he touch on, well, I know you said he touched on like theology,
Mm-hmm.
Christianity while being black.
Yeah.
Can you go a little bit more into that on like how he approached it and what you touched on?
With the use of theology, like with Cotton Mather and other people, Cotton Mather also drew on St. Paul, who is actually pro-slavery in some of his epistles. So he talks about how we use religion. It's another thing where it falls under that racist policies need racist ideas to justify them. So we're exploiting these people. We have to come up for a reason why we're doing it. You know what I mean? And then, and religion has always been used to control people. I'm not anti-religion, I'm not anything, but people will distort the messages, and especially the white Jesus that appears, I don't know when white Jesus really begins to appear, but that's where you're a person of any ethnicity and you look and you say, well, God's white, you know what I mean? So, white, God's white. And that's simply not true historically or anything, whether you're Christian or not. Jesus would have looked nothing like a white person at all. He actually would have looked more like a blending of all races, if you really thought about it. What an ancient Israelite, around the year 0 looked like, I hope does that help or?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much exactly.
Perfect. We create, to justify the slave trade, we have to come up with a reason why we're doing it. And the reasons are these racist ideas. And, it comes from Aristotle. It comes from, people, people who get a classical education are well-versed in Aristotle. And you remember, like Greeks had slaves and they had to justify that somehow. There has to be some inferiority why these people can't control their own lives,
So it's like they justify their slavery by saying they don't have a.
Yeah, they do. They say they're like Cotton Mather says. He says, you're better fed here. We take better care of you than if you had your own life, This is a good thing, and they rationalize that. They say, no. And throughout this book, you'll actually see the debate where people are actually pro-slavery and say, no. There's a study that was done about Northern Blacks, and this was the time of slavery. And there was a census, and it showed there were so many Black people who were insane. That was the term at the time. And this Dr. Jarvis, he did an analysis and they were like, look, freedom is driving Black people crazy. They can't handle it. They're going insane up there. So Dr. Jarvis, who's a great statistician and wanted to find the truth. He wasn't looking for an ideology. And he looked and he said, wow, this can't be possible. There's more insane Black people than there are Black people in the North. They created these statistics. It was the Secretary of State Calhoun at the time, who's from South Carolina. And they use policies like that. They'll say, look, we can't give them freedom. They'll go crazy. They can't live with us. And another concept he explores that's really good. It's one thing to say that slavery is dehumanizing. It's another thing to say that it accomplished it. You know what I mean? It's one thing to say, yes, that's a dehumanizing institution, but you can't say it actually dehumanizes people. They're no longer human. They're brutes, And that's in there too. Like that concept, yeah, slavery is dehumanizing, but it didn't accomplish it. You know what I mean? That's when he really points out things like that. And I honestly think he's the most important scholar in America today, honestly. And I urge you guys, he has stuff on YouTube. He has a number of other books. He's excellent. All right, thank you. Thank you. Yep. I don't know how to stop it. Okay. I hope I did all right, but I tried. It's so much in here. So much. Oh my goodness.